I'd like to speak to the women business owners specifically for a minute.
Please do.
Because I do think that as women, we have an extra level of societal pressure. As much as there have been growths in trying to break the glass ceiling, many women feel the societal pressure of having to home life, childcare, housekeeping, and be demure and proper and don't do this and don't do that because.
Welcome to the Business After Hours, where the ties loosen, the suit relax, and we talk business without the boardroom. Grab your favorite drink, kick back, and let's dive into the world of business after hours.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Business After Hours podcast here with my co-host Jared and our guest Sarah. How are you guys doing today?
Great. Thank you.
Great.
Good. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's hump day, so.
It's hump day. They'll be seeing it on Thursday, so,
Right. Yeah. Hump day today, at least.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, how are you doing?
I am very well. Feeling a little cold here in Augusta. We go through some weather changes that are pretty quick. So I was wearing shorts and t-shirts over the weekend, and 4 days later, I'm bundled up and trying to stay warm with the heater blasting. So
who says the South doesn't get all 4 seasons?
That's right. They just happen in 48 hours. That's all.
I don't think our HVAC systems know what to do at this point. They're like, do you want it cold, hot, cold? What do you want it? They constantly switch between the two.
Yeah, it's a little mixed up. So,
Sarah, why don't you give us a little bit of background about yourself and what led you to where you're at today?
Yeah, I would love to. So my education background is that I have a master's in clinical social work. And so I've had my own mental health practice treating adults struggling with trauma, anxiety, and depression for, I've had my own practice for about 10 years. And I've been practicing in mental health for a little over 20 years. And how that led to where I am now is that I was seeing a lot of adults who were coming to me for a variety of different issues. And one of the stress points was work. And they were trying to cope with life. And I am very careful not to say work-life balance because all of it is life.
Right.
And so they were trying to cope with life. And I was giving them skills that then they would go back to their leadership at work and run into roadblocks. And leadership having a really hard time being flexible in how they saw work getting done, taking note of the needs of family responsibilities. And, as we were joking before we started recording, weather things, hurricanes, fires, floods, whatever's happening,
yes.
How to navigate with your employees on how to do that. So what I decided to do was make a little bit of a shift. So I am still running a clinical practice, but I am simultaneously doing workshops and keynote speaking and individual leadership coaching for business leaders to help them to develop healthy workplace cultures that incorporate those things. I really want to help leaders to put the people back in work because onboarding costs can run up to $1,400 per employee. I mean, it's ridiculous. And so when we start paying attention to people in the workplace as leaders, then we have increased retention rates. We have increased productivity rates. People want to work and they really don't want to job hunt. And so I really want to help leaders to create spaces where their employees don't have to worry about job hunting anymore, that they really want to stay where they are.
I can feel that because I mean, it's a new stigma in the workplace. It feels like, because I see it all over LinkedIn where people are job hopping is a thing, obviously. And then you have people justifying job hopping, and then there's studies and reports out there that if you've been in your job for 5 years or more, you're behind not only in pay, but in your advancement. So it almost encourages job hopping when you see those kind of reports. How do you address that?
So I think with the job hunting, one of the things that leadership can work on to reduce that is to remember why you hired the person in the first place. And so one of the things that I talk about in my workshops with leaders is remembering that when you hired the employee, you looked at their resume, you did the interview, you really felt like they were a trained and competent adult. And so when we learn to treat our employees that way, as trained and competent, educated adults, then we go to them and we say, hey, we're running into XYZ as a problem. What are some ideas that you might have on how we can solve that? And then your employees might have ideas about that since they're on the ground and doing it.
Yeah.
And that allows for opportunities for advancement, so internal promotions. It allows for opportunities for people to be maybe in a niche project. A lot of my colleagues in the mental health field do not have the strongest organizational skills. And it is a set of skills that I have a really strong aspect of my personality is I like order and organization. And when I used to work for a large hospital system, they said, hey, do you want to be the person in charge of keeping us within compliance so the hospital department doesn't get shut down? Well, my colleagues ran for the hills. And I said, yes, please, let me do that. That would be great. It was one of the reasons why I really enjoyed working there. It wasn't because regulations are really fun, but I was seen as this is a strength of yours that is yours alone. So let me use that. And then that made me feel like I was contributing. It made me feel like I had a part in developing the business. And that's what people are looking for. When they're doing all that job hunting, Jeff, that you're talking about, they're looking for places where they feel respected. They're looking for places where they have advancement. They're looking for places where they can be seen.
Right. Mm-hmm. Now, on the mental health side of things, how, if you could put a percent on it or a number of some sort and just an educated guess based on your experience, mm-hmm. How many business owners and leaders are walking around with functional depression?
I would say it's probably pretty high. It's probably pretty high. And functional depression is not technically a clinical term, but functional depression in the colloquial sense is the idea that you put on the mask and you get through the day. And then I always talk to my folks. I always ask, one of my favorite questions in my first couple of sessions with my clients is, how many days a week do you cry in the shower? And they look at me like, are you watching me at home? How do you know that I'm crying in the shower? Right. I said, no, because we are exhausted. We are burnt out. We are overwhelmed as a society. And when people are not given the space to take care of themselves, then they burn out.
And do you find that particularly a struggle for like leaders and business owners to take care of themselves, like setting that time aside? It's what advice do you give to these people that take time out for themselves?
I think for the business leaders, the taking care of yourself and taking that time out is part of building that culture. And so I talk to them about, if you want to reduce the level of burnout for your employees, then you also need to demonstrate that taking time out for you is a priority. I got a great email 6 months ago or so now. I was doing just some feeder emails out to some leads, and I got an email back from an HR rep. And the subject line says, when are you taking your PTO? And I thought, that's kind of an odd automatic response. So I opened the email to see what it said. And she said, so when are you taking your PTO? Because I am currently taking care of myself. I am going to be out of the office XYZ dates, returning on XYZ dates. When I return, please submit your request for PTO to my office. And, Jeff, when you were asking about leaders and how do they take their PTO, I think that's a great example. Just normalizing it and saying, no. As a parent, as I don't know if either one of you are parents, but as a parent, you get to a point with your kids when they are complaining about something where you say, if there is no blood or bones and the house is not on fire, don't call me, right? And I think that if we can start incorporating a similar mindset in the business world, if your office hours are 9 to 5, do not email your employees. Do not read emails from your employees after 5 p.m. Do not direct message them. Do not text them. Do not reach into their private space. And when I say it that way, people get all kind of grossed out and go, I'm not reaching into private anything. You are. If you are texting, you are emailing, you are direct messaging, I don't care how much apology you put on that. When you say, you don't have to worry about this till tomorrow, I just wanted to. Great. There's a button next to your send button that says delay send. Don't send the email till tomorrow morning. Write it at 7 o'clock at night if you really need to. I get that. I have thoughts. I need to get them out. I'm going to put them on paper. Do not send it. And so when leaders do that, when they take care of themselves and they carve out that time, then they're modeling for their employees that is the expectation. And that's part of healthy workplace culture.
Yeah, I think it's, you hear of, these business leaders all across, like big names that are, transformational in their industry or whatever it might be, whether it be by wealth or they're in visionaries. And you always hear about their work ethic. Mm-hmm. And it always is like a lack of sleep. Mm-hmm. And long hours. And so as younger in the sense of like being smaller businesses, you see that and you're like, okay, that's how I need to be then to get to whatever level that person is at in life, whether it be finance or their business. How do we stay away from that? Because that seems to be, it's obviously where you kill yourself by comparison, right? And so how do we avoid that, of getting into that cycle of going, okay, well, this is what they do over here, so I need to do that as well. Mm-hmm. It goes against everything that you're saying right now, taking time out for yourself, making sure your mental health is there. It's constant battle, it feels like.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I think that you are asking some really, really great questions there. I think that it is a huge uphill battle against the normative culture in the U.S.
Yeah.
I made some comments to some friends recently. My family and I went on a vacation to Costa Rica. And I exhaled. I have a ton of respect for everybody that I met there. They were working very, very hard. Service industry people working very, very hard. But it was a totally different pace, culture, and expectation. We went to dinner and sat down at the table, and nobody came to the table for a good 5 minutes. They just expected you to be at the table because you wanted to dine with the people that you were sitting with. Mm-hmm. And then they kind of came over and almost kind of made it seem like if you don't need to order anything, you don't really have to. It's just kind of like, would you like something while you're sitting here? And then we would get our food. And then when we were done eating, nobody came to the table. Nobody came to rush our check to us. Nobody. Half the week we had to flag somebody down. Hey, we need to pay. We got to get to the next thing. And it was such a different cultural norm. And for a while there, I thought, oh, this is a tourist area. They're just trying to get us to kind of stay here. Nope, we went into town. We interacted with the local communities.
Right.
And it was the exact same thing everywhere we went. So when you say, how do we promote that? I think that as a culture, we have a lot of work to do.
Oh, yeah.
I think that within businesses, we get to decide that as the business leaders. We get to say, send the email that says nobody is to be working on this project past 6 p.m. I'm shutting it down. I did a job interview for a small counseling office once, and I didn't get the job. But one of the things that was so exciting about it was she asked me about how I typically work. And I said, well, I'll see clients right until this hour, and then I'm usually writing notes for a good hour or so. And she says, okay, well, just understand the lights go off and the door gets locked at 5. And I said, excuse me? And she said, we don't work past 5 o'clock. The lights turn off and the door gets locked and everybody has to leave by 5. So schedule your clients accordingly so that you have enough time to get whatever you need to get done. But we go home to our families at 5 o'clock. And that's what I mean when I say, Jeff, that it is about what is the leadership doing to shift the culture within that workplace.
Right.
And if you'll grant me permission, I'd like to speak to the women business owners specifically for a minute.
Please do.
Because I do think that as women, we have an extra level of societal pressure. Mm-hmm. As much as there have been growths in trying to break the glass ceiling, many women feel the societal pressure of having to home life, childcare, housekeeping, and be demure and proper and, don't do this and don't do that because of all of that. So these extra pressures that we're talking about, how to take care of self, I hear so many women feeling that pressure.
Sure.
Doubled down, quite honestly. I mean, the men feel it too. I'm not dismissing them, but I do think that there is definitely an extra level of pressure for women business owners and women leaders of how they're supposed to behave and what they're supposed to be doing.
Right.
Which makes it really tough.
I agree there. What are some steps that some female leaders and owners can take to help balance that?
So our female business owners and leaders, I think the first thing is really appreciate the strengths. So we do tend to be, a lot of us do tend to be a little bit more nurturing. Mm-hmm. And instead of seeing that as a weakness, seeing that as a strength.
I like that.
Yeah. So looking at it as maybe that's going to be a strength where you can approach somebody who's struggling. I have a client of mine now that we are working on helping her to set some more firm boundaries with her assistant, but also bringing in the nurturing part. And, she's really struggling with, well, I'm supposed to come in and lay down the law. No, you can set boundaries in a nurturing way. And we do that by approaching things with examples similar to, hey, I have noticed these things that you are supposed to be doing according to your position that just don't seem to be going the way that I think that you're capable of doing it. Can you talk to me a little bit about what's going on, what's getting in your way of doing that? And what are some things that you need from me to help support you in getting going in that? And if you look at how different that is than your typical performance improvement plan, right? Your typical performance improvement plan says, here's your job description. These are the things you aren't doing. You have 30 days to make progress on this, and we're going to meet every week to see how you're doing on the progress. No, nobody's motivated by that. Nobody is motivated by that. They go home, they get online, and they start job hunting, right? But if as leaders we say, we acknowledge, hey, I see that you are struggling. I acknowledge that maybe I put too much on your plate. I acknowledge that maybe I haven't given you the resources that you need to do your job well, right? And then once we do that, then we give the responsibility back to the employee. Okay, so now I've acknowledged all the things that I'm doing, or the barriers that I've created as your leader. I'm going to work on eliminating those. Now, what are you going to do? And that's the other part that I run into with leaders a lot of both genders, is that they get worried when I come into the picture that I'm going to say, well, just kind of be warm and fuzzy and gentle with everybody and let nobody ever really work, and they don't really have to do anything. That's not at all what I'm saying.
Right.
Ask my children. I still expect them to clean their bathroom, but I will let you choose which day to do it. Yeah.
And what about like when you have two employees that are performing at two different levels? Like you have one that comprehends things quicker, faster, versus that employee that's maybe a little bit slower but still works efficiently.
So, Jared, when you're asking about that, are you thinking about them doing the same job, having the same job responsibility? Okay. So one of the first questions that I would ask the person who's struggling is, again, going back to I'm noticing that you're struggling. Are there any barriers? Because sometimes the barriers are not fully understanding what the responsibilities are or the value of their position. And sometimes it's just not a right fit, So really asking, hey, these are the expectations that are in front of us. And this is the speed at which we expect you to get that done. Is that something that feels realistic for you? Or what accommodations would you need for that? So I do think that we get so hung up in the job that they were hired for is the job that they have to stay in, that if we open opportunity up a little bit and say, okay, maybe you were hired for this position, but you're actually better suited kind of over here to do this. Right? Because when people get excited, they perform better. When they're doing something they feel competent in, right? So I think that would be my approach with that is really checking in with the employee and getting a handle from them. And it is all about the language you choose to use. If you go to that exact same employee, like I said before about the performance improvement plans, which I'm not opposed to, you just have to choose how you form your language with it, right? But if you go in the traditional sense to the employee that maybe is underperforming and saying, so you're not really doing it, you're not making the marks, and Sally over here is doing so much better of a job, I don't understand what's going on, why can Sally do it and you can't? Which is not that far off from the language that some employers use.
Sure.
Right?
Do you think
we still ask the questions, just change the language?
No, that makes sense. When it comes to trying to shift Americans' way of culture, right? Because I mean, I feel like there's been times that it was close to shifting. We had the .com boom where they built all those nice buildings and they had, activities inside where they had TVs and Nintendos and coffee lounges and then that blew up. And then I feel like during COVID, we had the work at home culture that is now starting to diminish and go away as well, it feels like, because everybody's calling everybody's employees back. What do you think it might take to do a complete shift of this so that we can, because I feel like, your experience in where you went on vacation is pretty similar to other places around the world where, especially at dining areas.
Right.
What do you think it would take?
Well, I think that those two examples that you just gave, right? The .com burst and the COVID forcing of home, the reason why they felt like they got close is because they did have components of developing healthy work culture that we hadn't been experiencing up until then. So the, lounges and Nintendos and all of those kinds of things, was the appeal to that came out of the idea of everybody works at a different pace. Mm-hmm. And that allowing people to work at their own pace, people tend to work better at that. Sure. What didn't happen in a lot of environments that faltered with that model is that they forgot the accountability component. So they let people work at their own pace, but then forgot to give them deadlines or forgot to hold them accountable to the deadlines. Yeah, so
we're like our own worst enemy.
Yeah.
People took advantage.
Yeah, they did. And it wasn't, I put it back on leadership for that. It wasn't really the employee, one of the basic premises of human behavior is that we only do behavior for which we get a reward. So if I get to come to work and play video games all day, sure, I'll keep showing up and I'm going to play video games because video games are a lot more fun than programming. So, cool, I'm going to go do that. So I think that was a mistake in that. I think with the work from home, one of the things that happened that really works well with that environment is that it acknowledges that we do have life that happens outside of work. And so people were able to run their laundry, right? They were able to monitor their children or start dinner at 4 instead of 7 after fighting traffic. So that all worked really well. What has happened with the work from home that isn't working very well, and there are skills that leaders can learn to counter this, since it is the environment that we're in right now, but is how isolating it is. So as human beings, we are social animals. Mm-hmm. We are social animals. If you think about where society thinks about the man that lives on the mountain in the cabin all by himself and hasn't seen anybody else in 15, 20 years, right? That stereotype, and everybody goes, oh, no.
It's like a dream.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was me.
Sign me up.
But you get very, very isolated, and we are social animals. We have to have connection. And one of the downfalls of the work from home is that people are not doing video calls. And the newest research is showing that even with these video calls, the nervous system isn't reading it the same way. So even if we're talking and I smile at you and we're on this video call, your brain is not picking up the smile the same way that it would if we were all sitting in the same space together. And so there's a neurological disconnect that's happening. So people are feeling more isolated. They feel like it takes more of an effort to collaborate. When you are in office with somebody in the same space and you get up to go to the restroom and you come back to go to your desk and you pass Jared's desk and you go, oh, hey, yeah, Jared. Hey, I was thinking about that thing that we were talking about in the staff meeting. What do you think about doing this? And it isn't a planned, we didn't set a meeting. It just organically happened. Right. And we miss that in the work from home environments that a lot of leaders are leading. And so one of the things that I encourage leaders that have a remote workforce is get the meetings started. First of all, only have meetings if you actually need them. Okay. Yeah. But when you have a meeting, if your meeting is at 3, set the time from 3 to 3:10 where everybody just checks in. Hey, how you doing? And if somebody wants to say, I'm fine, great, that can be their check-in. If they want to say, well, this weekend I went to this show with my dad and it was really funny and, blah, blah, great. But we need that social connection. We need to be able to have organic conversations, and doing it through direct messaging does not fill the need.
Yeah,
It just
I
doesn't
can
do
see
it.
that. And that's the stuff that I wish would be explained more instead of just we're calling folks back and disrupting the workforce and making people mad because now all of a sudden people are like, well, I signed up as remote. I want to stay remote. But understanding, I guess, the psychology behind it, because it does make sense. And I feel like more people might understand a little bit more if they understood instead of just, hey, come back home, which would fall back on the leaders, of course.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the draw of podcasting right now. Podcasting is really taking off and people feel like they're part of a conversation. So even if they're not talking back to the podcast host, whether it's this style where you're doing an interview style or if it's a monologue style, either way, it feels like a conversation. And that meets some of that social need that we all have.
Well, Sarah, as we wind down here, I'd like to highlight yourself and your business on what you do and how you can help leaders and pitch what you like to do.
Great. Well, I appreciate that. So as I said earlier, I offer keynote as well as workshop talks. My workshops are very interactive and I encourage people to bring whatever is coming into their workplace to the workshop so we can workshop it out. And I also offer individual leadership coaching. So I do tell people I do not work in spreadsheets. I cannot tell you what in money to invest in which part to build your business. That's not my thing. So I am very much a people professional. So I will talk to you about how to build that healthy workplace culture so that your employees, because they do want to work, so that your employees who do want to work want to stay where they are working. That's my goal.
Awesome. Well, you guys hit Sarah up. We're going to put her links down in the description below so that you guys can easily click them and visit her. We got her LinkedIn and her webpage, so you guys pay her a visit. Tell her we said hi. Jared, you got anything else?
No. Thanks, Sarah, for coming on. It was great to have you. Great conversation. Always love talking mental health and business. So thanks. I'd love to have you on again if we can.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you so much, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. And hopefully nothing but success from here on out for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a great day, guys.
Absolutely. You too.
Welcome to the Business After Hours, where the ties loosen, the suit relax, and we talk business without the boardroom. Grab your favorite drink, kick back, and let's dive into the world of business after hours.